everybody. Happy day, happy Wednesday from Miller Park Zoo. I'm Shannon, the educator here at the zoo, and today we're talking geckos. Geckos are fantastic animals. We're all very familiar with one certain gecko who has an animatronic voice and who, the animated guy on the commercials, and he truly is a type of gecko. He's a Madagascar giant day gecko, which is pretty fun. So geckos are familiar in our lives. Mostly we see them in a cartoon kind of way, and they kind of look like cartoons in real life, I think. I want to introduce you to Andre. Andre is a new Caledonian giant gecko. Oh, look at, he's saying hey. I love that. He's called Andre, well, he's Andre the Giant, of course. Thanks Julia Benzel for giving him that wonderful name. We're excited about him. So he is actually the largest gecko species in the world. They come from New Caledonia, which is an island off the coast of Australia. There are lots of geckos that come from that particular island in that area of the world as well, so he's not alone in there. But he is the biggest. You can tell they're really bulky. Their body is very bulky, their head is very large. I think that's a fun thing about it. He's very top heavy with his head. And even feels that way when you're holding him. He kind of leans to the front. A little bit of, I don't know, it's interesting to feel him. Geckos are reptiles, so they do have a scale-covered skin. With them, it's difficult to see their scales. In fact, when they shed their scales, it's paper thin. It's translucent. You can see your hand through that shed. They'll shed in chunks until all of that comes off. But they don't have the thick scales that some lizards have. The geckos just have more of that light layer. And then you can tell by his coloration, well, he's really not trying to be bright. He's trying to be camouflaged. He's going to blend in his environment. Most geckos are climbers. And so he's going to be looking for a tree to hang out in. He'll spend almost his whole life, basically his whole life up in a tree, in a bush, and then needs to have that camouflage in order to hide, because he would be a tasty nugget. So that's what his coloration is all about. It's pretty cool. It's very, very cool. So many neat things about geckos. We have another gecko species here at the zoo as well. Right next door to me, we have our mossy leaf-tailed geckos. We have two of these guys. We have a male and a female. The male is the light-colored one, and Eric's showing you that one right now. Now, just to give you a little personal note on him, most geckos do have a feature where their tail can detach if there's pressure put on that by, say, a predator. It's a defense mechanism. So if you can live without your tail, you can't live without your head. So the thing is, they want the predator to, if they're going to grab the tail, they can detach that tail, and then they'll grow a new one. They can't do this indefinitely. They can't do it multiple times, but once or twice. You can usually tell if it's a second tail, not the original, which is interesting too. Well, this little guy, several months ago, he ended up dropping his tail just in the course of a day. Something was going on with him. He was stressed a little bit, and so his tail dropped. So he's growing a new one, which is kind of interesting. Now we do have a second gecko in here. Now it's a little tricky. This one is really showing off its camouflage. These guys are so cool because what they will do, they have these extra skin flaps on their sides, all up and down their body, from their chin all the way down to the end of their tail. And they lay on a branch, just right up against the branch. Not sitting on it, but attached to it. And their skin flaps will just expand. And that way it makes their outline really unable to be determined. It really just mushes them up a little bit, smushes them against the branch. And then predators really can't tell that it's not just the branch. These guys can be really difficult to find sometimes, which is a lot of fun. When you come to see this exhibit in Zoo Lab, I hope you'll look for them and see if you can find both of them, because it can be tricky. These guys are both just 2 years old. So they're very young. The lifespan of a gecko depends on the species. These guys aren't as long-lived as the New Caledonia giant geckos like Andre here. Andre's 14. We could expect him to live to be around 20 here with us at the zoo. They do eat some different things. They might be herbivores, they might be omnivores, they might be carnivores. If you don't know what those words mean, ask your fourth grader, because they've learned that. These leaf-tailed geckos that Eric's showing you right now, these guys are carnivores, so they're going to eat mostly invertebrates, so insects, spiders. They see a cricket in here. Do they mostly eat crickets here, Eric?
That's what they mostly eat, yeah.
Fantastic. And then Andre is an omnivore, so he's going to eat a lot of fruits. He's going to find fruits in the trees, maybe flowers, some kind of leafy things, and then also, and nectar as well is one of those wonderful treats. And then he might eat some invertebrates as well. He could eat eggs. He could eat some small mammals. So he's an omnivore. He's an animal that will eat both meat and plants. At the zoo, he's going to get some mealworms mostly, and also some nectar in the form of baby food, right?
Yeah, we take some baby food, add a little bit of calcium and other nutrients, things like that, and mix it all together, and then they lick it up.
Cool. Well, do we have any questions at this point?
We have a couple so
Good.
far. Cassie says that his skin looks rough, but I don't. Do you think it's rough, or I think it's?
It's a teeny bit like, okay, so if you took sandpaper and you used it a lot till it was really nubbed down, there's a little teeny bit of texture like that left. But it's also very silky. It's kind of hard to explain. Part of it for him, I think, is these guys have a lot of skin. It's almost like there's loose skin, and that makes them feel a little more soft. But there is a texture to him.
It's almost like textured rubber. Like if you buy something made of rubber that's got some, like no stick on it, or like no skid grip.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that
kinda
almost.
like that. It's very hard to explain.
April's watching, and she missed the very beginning. What kind of gecko is he again?
Oh, he's a New Caledonia giant gecko. His name is Andre, the giant gecko.
And then we had one more. Pinky asks, does it ever camouflage at the zoo?
Well, in his enclosure, he's not on exhibit. We do have two, though, that are on exhibit up in the very front of the zoo. When you first walk in, there's an enclosure, a tank right up front with two of these guys in there. And they do camouflage very well. You can, it depends on where they are. Eric's got it set up where there's a lot of branches and some leaves and some logs to hide in. And if they're sitting on those, it can be tricky to find them. But it depends on how we set things up, if they can camouflage or not. These animals do not change colors. They are this color, so they need to find a spot that looks like them in order to camouflage. That's what they'll do in the wild. So at the zoo, if we want them to be camouflaged, we're gonna have to set it up that way. Andre is a program animal, so he's gonna be, he lives off exhibit, and he has lots of things to climb on. So he's happy and comfortable, but he's easy to see.
Most of the time, the geckos like to hang on the walls. You know, talk about how they just hang on the glass, because that's where a lot of people see them, just hanging on the glass.
That's right. Oh, I love this. Gecko feet are like my favorite thing. It's mind blowing to me. So I don't know, Eric, can you get up close of his feet?
Yeah, we're gonna do our best.
So he's got. Try not to make him angry. Andre, the angry giant gecko. No, he's chill. He's doing really good. He doesn't mind showing you his feet. So if you look at his toes, they do have 5 toes, and the ones who climb, they have little ridges on their toes. And if you're looking just with the naked eye, you can see those ridges. I know, Andre. Hang on one sec, Bubby. He just puts his floppy toes down all the time. And he says, I don't want to climb. I want to play. I don't want to show you my stuff. All right, he's got it nailed. There we go. What do you think, bud? So those ridges, it's interesting. The story behind it is really cool. You might have to look that up, how they found out. So there's different animals who can attach themselves to surfaces and climb upside down. We think about flies, think about spiders, think about tree frogs. Well, spiders, flies, they do this through more of a suction cup kind of an idea. The tree frogs have a substance, a sticky substance on their toes that help them to stick. It's really gummy, and it helps them to stick onto the trees and the walls and the windows. Depends on where you live, what you'll find there, but that's how they do it. With the geckos, they had to do some serious experimentation to figure it out because it's neither of those things. They found that on those ridges that are on their toes, it's like just ridges of skin. They have millions of hairs on those ridges. And when scientists found those, they thought, ooh, that must be the trick. So they tried, and they just couldn't replicate that attachment to surfaces with just those hairs. So they kind of had to wait until a more powerful microscope was invented. And once they got a powerful enough microscope, they could see on an atomic level. And they found that they have millions of hairs on each of their hairs, on their ridges, on their toes. So now we're talking molecular stuff. So think about the building blocks of matter are atoms, which bond together with static electricity to make molecules, which then create things, okay? On surfaces that are hard surfaces like these, this wood, countertop, the glass, I don't want to pound on the glass, never pound on the glass at the zoo. They're hard surfaces, and they're tightly packed molecules. The gecko's toes, those hairs, on the ridges, on the toes, can go between the molecules. They're so small, they go between the molecules and use the static electricity that's holding the molecules together to form the substance, and they can stick there with the static electricity. It is absolutely incredible. And then there's no, they just can release it, they just pull it, and it's, it's sort of like you have the balloon stuck on your head. When you rubbed a balloon on your head, you got that static electricity, and it'll hang on your head as long as you want it to, but then you can take it off. It's not that tricky, so it'll release. Now this will not work on loosely formed molecules. So Jello, they're not gonna climb Jello, but they can climb any hard surface. They can be upside down, right side up. It's really, really cool. It's like mind-blowing science. So neat.
Yeah, you can see that one there, just hanging upside down.
Yep.
Through the power of static electricity.
It's a fabulous thing.
Colette is wondering, I know you said this, but which geckos are in the Gecko commercials?
Oh, the Gecko commercials. Those are that is a Madagascar giant day gecko. It's an animated version of one. We have had those at the zoo. Some of you guys who've been around a while and come to see us for a while now, we had those about 10 years ago. We had some giant day geckos. Geckos are really cool, and most of them live in trees. There are some that are very popular pet geckos called leopard geckos, and they are in fact ground-dwelling geckos. So they don't have that sticky, the hairs on their feet. They don't need it. They're actually found in the deserts of Iran. So they're going to be on the ground all the time. And so you don't see that fleshy foot, you just see a little toe with a nail, because that's what they need. Animals have all these great adaptations for where they live. It's really cool.
Grace's mom's watching, and she asked if he's always so calm.
That's a great question. I have a glove that I use to get him out, especially if he is not being handled every day. Right now he's not being handled every day, so he just gets surprised when we go in to pick him up in his house, gets a little territorial about his house, and he will lash out and give a little nip. That little nip doesn't feel great. He leaves a little smiley face. That's the shape of his teeth, which is kind of fun to have, but at the same time, kind of not. So we use a glove to pick him up, but as soon as he comes out of his house, he is so great. He's just chill. He gets active like this. He gets where he likes to climb, and he does potentially jump, so I don't want to get too close to our other exhibits because we'll be having to chase him down. But he's very calm. He's very amenable to being handled after that. Great guy.
Larkin wants to know, if you have one in captivity, how big would the tank need to be?
Well, I think that what we're looking at, and you can chime in here, Eric, with what you know as a keeper. I feel like this tank is the minimum size you would want
For
one of these geckos.
For a New Caledonian. Now, New Caledonians, unfortunately, in the reptile trade, you can get almost anything you want in the private sector. Doesn't mean you should own it, but there's somebody who will sell it to you. New Caledonians are generally hard to get. They can be kind of finicky, so they're not the best pets. Same thing with these leaf-tail geckos. Leopard geckos are great pets, and this would be way bigger than you would need for a leopard gecko. But for a New Caledonian, an adult New Caledonian giant gecko, this is the minimum. And then I think if you had like a pair of leaf-tail geckos or something similar, so like if you could get a giant day gecko, this would probably be good for like a breeding pair. Gives them plenty of room to crawl around on. You can put stuff in there for them to climb on and hide behind. But in general, I think, if you get something like this, give them plenty of places to hide and stick to the glass, and then you can spend time figuring out their camouflage and where they're hiding and stuff. And your mom and dad are watching, Shannon, if you want to say.
Oh, hi, Mom, Dad.
Happy late Mother's Day.
All
That's all we
right.
have.
Well, I don't know if we talked much about it. We can go back and kind of talk a little more about where would they come from. So this is kind of a gecko who's going to be found in, again, New Caledonia, which is in Australasia. It's an island off of Australia. These geckos, the mossy leaf-tailed geckos, are found in Madagascar. There are about 1,500 different types of geckos, and they're found worldwide, mostly in warm tropical climates. A lot of the animals, a lot of the lizards that people call geckos aren't necessarily geckos. So that's one of those misnomers. But geckos are amazing. They're so interesting. So many interesting adaptations that they have. That's a great thing about lizards in general. There are a lot of different kinds of lizards, and they're so unique to each other and from each other. So I encourage you to do a little bit of Googling and look for some great pictures. There's so much great photography out there with wildlife, and so find some of the pictures, some of the things that people have been documenting about the geckos, and take a look at all the different kinds. There's so many neat kinds of geckos. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was wonderful to see you.
Have a good weekend.